So now that we know what Flutter is, or that we at least have a rough idea about that, let's have a look at the architecture of a Flutter application. And there, the most important thing, which you'll see over and over throughout the course, is that Flutter has that idea of building user interfaces as code. That's called UI as code. You build a widget tree in your Flutter apps, and I'll come back to that in a second. In the end, the idea is that you will have no visual drag and drop editor for adding buttons or text inputs to your screens to what the user sees. Instead, you'll work only in code. We'll write everything in code, and whilst this might sound intimidating at first, you will see that Flutter has a really nice approach for that, which makes creating interfaces with this UI as code approach a breeze. Now, besides this core idea of how you build your apps in Flutter, this UI as code approach, it's also important to understand that Flutter apps do actually embrace platform differences whilst being based on one code base. So we work in one project, but we will still have the ability to create different user interfaces at some points or in some parts of our app if we need it for the different platforms. Because Android and iOS are not exactly the same. They're not just for different phones, they do have some small differences. And sometimes it doesn't matter to you, but if it does, Flutter gives you the tools to find out on which platform you're running, so that if you're on Android, you can execute code A, and if you're on iOS, you can execute code B. So Flutter gives you the full flexibility there. Now let's first of all have a look at that widget thing again. In Flutter, everything's a widget. That's important to understand. If you had an app that looks like this, then this is a bunch of widgets. For example, here, the app bar at the top with the tabs in there, that's one huge widget with a lot of smaller widgets in there. And all these elements on the screen are just widgets in the end. You build your entire screen, your entire app from such widgets. Actually, the whole page is a widget, and even the whole app is wrapped in one main widget. And a widget, as you will see throughout this course, is really just a code snippet, an instruction you place in your code. Something like, please render a button here. That's a widget. It'll be as simple as that. And your entire app is therefore built as a widget tree. You have this root widget, which is your app itself. Then you might have different screens there. On the different screens, you have different sections, and in there you might have text inputs, text outputs, buttons, tabs, drop-downs. And a widget might hold other widgets. For example, your tabs widget might hold individual tab widgets. But thinking about this in an abstract way can be really difficult, and therefore for now, just keep that term widget tree in mind. We'll have a look at how this works and how this looks, and we'll actually write all the code for that together throughout the course. Now, this UI as code concept is also important. If you had an application that looks like this here, then, as I mentioned earlier, you don't build it by dragging and dropping elements into a visual editor. You have no visual editor indeed. Instead, you only work in code. The code for this could look like that here. And here you already get a brief preview at how these widgets work and how you structure your entire app with the help of these widgets, how you configure your app with these widgets. And as you can see, even without understanding that code, that probably doesn't look too difficult. In the end, here we just have a bunch of instructions on what should get rendered on the screen and how the different things are related. And of course, you'll learn all about that throughout the course. So this is an extremely straightforward way of building your app, and I will introduce you to this approach carefully, step by step. We'll build our apps from scratch, and I will introduce you to the core widgets and how they work together step by step in this course. Now, this one code base thing or concept is also important to understand. In the end, you will have a bunch of Dart files in your project, and these will make up your application, and you build an Android and an iOS app based on that one project. But as I mentioned, if you need to, you can still find out on which platform you are running and then render different content based on that platform. So these are the core Flutter ideas. Again, if they're not 100% clear at this point, that's normal. We just started. We'll of course use all these features and go through all these features step by step as we progress through the course.